cloud. Done. We're recording. So, welcome. For those of you that I have not met, my name is Teresa Kegley. I am going to be serving, stumbling, failing through, leading this group this year. For those of you that I haven't met and were unable to come to the kickoff, we're really excited to bring you through this next year. As you can imagine, it has been a difficult one to plan and coordinate, like many of you in your professions. There's been all kinds of things that we've navigated. So before I do so, normally at this point of the meeting, we would introduce our board again, as we would have ended the year that way. So I'm just going to have them wave instead of unmute, but I'm going to introduce our board of directors for 2020, 2021 that are going to be helping keep me in line and helping us kind of continue to grow this group. So our board members this year, and excuse me while I read them off of a list. Vice President is Tammy Kellerman, Secretary Lisa Radant, Treasurer Janet Fisher, Awards Jody Pericone. Sorry, Jody, kind of mushed your name all into one thing. Communications Janelle, History Robin Mann, Past President Jocelyn Hare, trying to fill some big shoes here, guys. Policy Cheryl Seo, Professional Development, Yvonne Peterson and Karen Arce. Programs, Maureen Solverson. Public Relations and co-host extraordinaire on Zoom, Tammy English. Reservations, Mary Maxted. Scholarships, Pam Timmons. Special Events, Diane James. And our webmaster, Miss Sue Snyder. So thank you. Truly, without these ladies, we would not be able to even do this in Zoom. I am sure that many of you can relate in different, whether it's your personal or professional life, that doing life recently has seemed to be, takes more time and effort and can be a little more challenging for what we hope is the same result. And I will tell you, this organization is no different. We are still very committed to bringing encouraging and applicable speakers in front of you each month. Doing that via Zoom and some other ways that we, continue to reach our people gets a little bit trickier. So I know there was some communication with timing and things like that. So thanks for being here. I'm sorry if that, tied anybody up or got anybody mixed up on timing, but we're excited that you're here now. And we may notice some other people jumping on here as we go. So, but that being said, if you weren't at the kickoff, I want to kind of walk through what our theme for the year is, if you will. Picking a theme every year can be challenging because we're trying to find something that's applicable and also relevant to everybody, because as you know, our Zoom room today is filled with truly my greatest mentors and the people that encourage us every day. And we all work in different capacities doing different things. And so finding a theme that was relevant and can encourage all of us and send us with action steps can get a little tricky. So our program team worked diligently to find that theme this year. And with that being said, our theme this year is resilient. We did announce that at the kickoff, and at our kickoff, we again did a fun little skit to go along with it that is just recently uploaded to YouTube. So at the end of this meeting, there is some literature and some meeting notes that we'll send along with it. And with that, we'll send the I don't know if it's for embarrassment purposes or what, but it was a beautifully written script by Yvonne Peterson, and all of us got a little uncomfortable acting some silly parts, but it truly, I think, made it relevant for all of us to be able to know what resilience really looks like. So, but that programming committee kept coming back to the actual definition of resilient. So I'm going to read that because I think it's really powerful. So resilient, the power or ability to return to the original form, position, etc. after being bent, compressed, or stretched. The ability to recover after illness, depression, adversity, or like. It means buoyancy. And I just thought, like, how true. Like in this season, we've all been stretched. And some of it, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, is illness. Some of it has been grief and sadness. Some of it has been reinventing our businesses and finding different ways to reach and connect. And I think we could all find that piece of resilience within us. So, and as we've talked about each month, we're going to highlight just different ways of being resilient and what that looks like. We're going to highlight individuals that we've seen resilience live through, or that have been educators and have taught us through some of those things. And so as we go through each one, it became really adamant to the group that yes, we want somebody to speak in and encourage us, but more than ever, we want those individuals to send us with action steps, give us a takeaway, um, allow us to make those ripples within our community. Because what I do know is Rockford Network of Professional Women may be a smaller group of individuals, but the impact and the ripple effect they have in our community are endless. And so, although Zoom looks a little different and membership looks a little different, if you weren't here when Jocelyn introduced a friend that lives out of town, I think that's exactly it. What are ways that we can continue to make ripples and impact on others that aren't just in Rockford, in our community? Because it all does, it comes back to our home and how we can bless other people. So please feel free to share that out. I would love to encourage people to do that. And really encourage people as we go through these pillars. Some of them may seem more relevant than others to you. Some of them may seem more applicable, but I think that they've all been carefully selected to truly make an impact and make a difference. So, well, with that being said, you did not come here to listen to me gab the whole time. So I get the privilege of doing an introduction, and I get to introduce our first speaker for highlighting the pillar of self-awareness. So let me kind of give you a little bit of a bio about our speaker today. It was on our website as well. And then I'm going to let her kick off right from the get-go after that, just to kind of help fill our cups and give us some action steps. So Fatma began her journey at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in pre-medicine, earning a degree in biology, Spanish, and leadership development. Okay. although a non-traditional route, her unique perspective and lived experiences have led her in a role in healthcare management. Through her passion for culture work, she unites her community by building meaningful relationships and encouraging others to capitalize on the diverse skills, perspective, and experiences. Please help me, give me an air clap and welcome our speaker today, Fatma.
Hello, thank you so much. First off, I just want to thank Tammy. You spoke so much about building new connections, and I am just so overjoyed to be here this morning. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Teresa, for being, playing multiple roles and dealing with the technology on my behalf as well. So thank you. I'm going to put a timer on myself because I know I could talk for ages, but I'm going to jump right in and get started. I do encourage you to use the chat feature, and feel free to toss in any questions, and if we have any time at the end, I'd be happy to. So right off the bat, I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can you all see it? Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm here today to speak about diversity and inclusion. So that's what I specialize here in Ada Grace, and has kind of been a hot button topic this year, especially with all that has been going on post the death of George Floyd and so many others. I think it is something that has always been around, but has been definitely a bit more of a focus this year. And so I will speak about that. I could speak for hours, so I've tried to make it tangible to the work that you all do, and hopefully will leave you with some takeaways. So right off the bat, I'm going to have you pop open your chat feature, and I'm going to ask you to answer a quick question for me. So how many of you believe that the role of a diversity and inclusion practitioner should exist? Okay. So I can't see all of the comments coming through since I'm presenting, but generally when I do this activity, I generally get a number of yeses. A handful of people will, the majority of people, if not everyone, will say, yes, I think it's important, and I think we should have a diversity and inclusion practitioner. And then those that are on the fence and want to say no likely won't because I'm presenting. But my answer to this question is no. I don't believe that a diversity and inclusion practitioner should exist. And my reason why is that when I boil down diversity, equity, and inclusion, for me, it is respect. It's about showing individuals from different backgrounds, cultures, etc., respect, treating them as individuals, getting to know them, building culture and community. And I would hope that we lived in a society in which, you know, positions like mine didn't exist, but that's where we're at right now. And there's certainly a lot of work to do. And I certainly believe that everyone can kind of grapple with this notion. So with that, I say respect. Now, respect is simply the willingness to take a second look. So can we pause and take a look at some of the systems that we have or the processes that we have in place within our organizations? Can we pause and say, hey, let's question how that's been done in the past? Some of the smaller notions. The third bullet on the slide I always point out, tolerance is not respect. And so if you are married or have a significant other and they come home from work and you say, hey, I tolerate you, right? That's probably not something that they might appreciate. But if you say, hey, I respect you, that means a whole lot more. And so how do we show respect to one another? And then the other piece that I will say is respect is not a spectator sport. And so it takes effort, it takes action, not just talk, but real action to make this work happen. And so when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, I really think about respect. So with that, I'm going to jump and dive into inclusion. So my work is, my title in itself is diversity and inclusion. I like to start with inclusion for a very specific reason, but also, you know, you talked about your theme this year being resiliency and self-awareness, and I think inclusion is a perfect place to start. So the reason I say to start with inclusion is because many organizations will jump at diversity because it's metrics. You know, how do we create a diverse population or a workforce? How do we diversify our resources or supply chains? But if you don't have an inclusive workplace, a culture where people feel like they can belong, where there's trust and mutual respect, those individuals aren't going to stay. And so how do we get people in the door and then keep them? And so that's why I really like to focus inwardly first, make sure that our organizations are built correctly, and then work on the diversity piece. So why diversity and why is it important? Now, people always ask me, where do I start and how do I pitch this to my organization, especially for those that don't have diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces within the organization or individuals working in this area. And I always say it for me is one of the easiest things to pitch because it has so many benefits. Now, I pointed out kind of the big three on this list, but it improves and creates a stronger and more effective workplace. So better business benefits, you're going to see higher performance, innovation, and creativity coming from your staff. A better inclusive culture, again, wanting to keep people. A happier workforce, so better retention and stronger performance. And finally, a highly inclusive workforce. And so keeping people around, less turnover means less having to spend money to retrain, rehire, and all of that. And so I certainly feel like it's a no-brainer to many organizations, and I feel like especially this year, after all that has happened, I've been seeing organizations kind of left and right jumping at this and acknowledging just how important it is. So we don't have enough time to actually run through this exercise, but I do have an attachment that I'm sure Tammy or Teresa can send out afterwards for you to walk through this activity. But this is a quick self-awareness activity, and it's called the Trusted 10. And it is your circle. So who is within your circle? So what I ask people to do is write down a list of 10 people that you trust. And for many, they'll say, I don't know if I can think of 10, but try to think of maybe even five people that you truly trust and that are within your network, and they can't be family members, okay? So 10 people that you truly trust. And again, trust can mean something very different to each person, but someone that you trust, that you feel comfortable sharing things, that you feel like you trust their opinion, you can bounce ideas off of them. So who are those core people in your life? And then I ask you to fill out kind of a table. So you list them out, and then you write out their gender identity, their race and ethnicity, their education level, age, marital status, disability, any other category that you can think of, and you list it all out. There are some guided questions that I have provided you, but really taking a look at your trusted 10 and figuring out how diverse is it? What's the gender mix? Do you have individuals within your trusted network that are 20 years older than you or 20 years younger than you? And how diverse really is that group? What you'll realize is this. So this is the kind of a larger circle. So if we apply this to a workplace, your outermost circle is your entire organization. That's your most diverse network. And those are likely just going to be acquaintances. So you might see them around, you might see their names in email chains, but you might not really know them very well. Then you get a little closer to the center and you have individuals that you get along well with, but it's going to take time to really build that trusting relationship. And then at the very center is your trusted 10. So these are your kind of go-to people in your organization. Those are the individuals that if you have an idea, you're going to bounce it off of them. That's your most homogenous group. And what ends up happening is you have a like me bias. And so those individuals that are right at that center are the individuals that are going to they're going to think like you, likely they're going to have very similar backgrounds to you. And they're very like you. And so what happens oftentimes is you have the same trajectory with the proposals that you pitch. And so I ask you to consider, take a step back and think, who can I invite into my network that's going to challenge me to think differently? Because that makes a huge difference. And so within your organizations, if you look at your C-suite or your leadership or your executive team, when they're making important decisions, who are they inviting to the table? Is it always the same people? And that makes a huge difference, not only professionally, but also in your personal life. Okay, so that's kind of the an inclusion piece that I wanted to run through real briefly. The diversity piece is where I get the most questions. So I'm going to go ahead and run through this. Let me preface by saying I'm going to throw a ton of information at you. I know it's a lot, but again, I have handouts with all the steps, so you don't have to feel like you need to jot everything down, but you'll have those to go off of. So again, the importance of diversity and inclusion. As I mentioned earlier, inclusion has a number of benefits, as does all of this work. And so I find it very, very easy to pitch to leaders within organizations. The image on this screen, so this graph very clearly depicts that diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams, with a caveat that they must be well managed. So well managed diverse teams will outperform homogeneous teams. They result in more creativity and innovation, better decision making. That difference in perspective, the individuals again that are brought to the table are going to encourage you and they're going to challenge you to be better. I personally in my life have always felt that if I'm not being challenged, I'm not growing. And so I try to surround myself with individuals that challenge me to be better. And so how do we kind of get out of our tendencies or our comfort zone to really challenge ourselves? This year, I'm sure, has challenged us all in many ways of really getting out of those comfort zones, but being resilient in doing so. So where do you start? This is the most common question that I get from individuals that are just getting started in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So one thing I will say is that there's no finite ending to this work. I'm not going to say that, one day we're just going to achieve it, but it's a journey. And so every organization is on a journey and they're all at different stages. You might just be getting started, or you might be 5 years in, or some even further down the road. The other thing that I will say is that there's no cookie cutter approach to this work. And so what may work for me at a Grace is not going to work for your organization. It's really about getting to know your organization to know how to proceed. So this is I think, in my opinion, the simplest model that I have seen out there with regards to how to get started. So again, there's a handout on this, so you'll have all this information as I walk through these steps. So this is a model that was created by the People Company, so a colleague of mine by the name of Debbie Biddle, who's phenomenal. And it is a 9-step approach, starting with envisioning all the way through clockwise to sustaining. One thing I will note right off the bat that many people overlook are the words at the center of the circle, starting with resistance. Now, I say this because I'm very realistic, but also acknowledging that diversity, equity, and inclusion work, so DEI work, results in resistance. It's resistance to change and often ideas that are challenging the norm. And that's very, very hard for organizations to get on board with. And so I'm saying this because I want you to be prepared that there might be some resistance to some of the ideas that you might suggest. It's going to take a lot of energy to pitch things. But once you get momentum going and you get staff on board, you'll see how motivated people get and how excited they get about this. And there's a real commitment to it. And that commitment, if you have leadership buy-in and you have that commitment at the very top, it makes this work so more impactful and so much more meaningful. So with that, I'm going to jump right in and start with envisioning. So envisioning is understanding your why. There is a video by Simon Sinek, which I'm sure many of you have seen. It's been around for, I think, over a decade now. If you simply YouTube Simon Sinek and look up Finding Your Why, it is a quick video that really explains, and I personally believe is applicable to any industry and any organization, of really understanding what is your mission, what is your vision, and how does diversity, equity, and inclusion work really align with that? And where do you want to be? Now, the diversity dimensions model on the right side of the screen has a number of places to start. Right in the center is usually where organizations start. And that is because many organizations want to start with metrics. And so taking a look at age and gender or sexual orientation, physical ability, ethnicity, and race, that's generally where organizations start. Now, it can be overwhelming because you don't really know where to start, but I always say, start with what aligns with your mission and vision. So if you're an organization that wants to, whose product is more geared towards females, well, then maybe your focus is gender. If you're trying to diversify your staff internally, and what does that look like? For us at Grace, very much so, it has been kind of focused on race and ethnicity, making sure that we want our organization or our patients and our staff to be more representative of the patient population. And so for a lot of our work, it has been focused on race and ethnicity. And so again, it's understanding what is important for your organization and where do you start. And again, that may very well be very different for different organizations. So after revisiting your why, I will say move on to an assessment. An assessment is really taking a look at your company culture. So where are you? Establish that baseline and determine where you're at. The best way for me to do this is really to get some data, go around and talk to people, do state interviews or focus groups, create an in-depth data review. Pulse surveys work out great. So there are oftentimes, I think I actually last week sent out a pulse survey to staff. A very quick, like 3-question survey allows me to assess where are we at as an organization. What are staff feeling discomfort with? What do they want to see from me? What can I provide them? And so very simple questions. The shorter the surveys, the better, because I know staff get a lot of questions asked of them. And they have a lot on their plate, but the more information that you can capture, it's a bit harder now with not being in the office, but really assessing company culture, I think, is even more important now than ever with us many of us working remotely. The next one is strategy. Strategy is, as we all know, I know a 3-year blueprint is a great idea, but I think the important piece to note is that this might change very easily. And so acknowledge that, yes, even if you have a blueprint and strategy down, that it might very well change. And to be okay with knowing that, and that if you pitch an idea and you fail, that you're going to learn from that. And failing forward is incredibly important in this work. So again, reviewing your mission, vision, and values, and then aligning your D&I values with those. And if you're able to make sure that they align, it'll be so much easier to get people on board within your organizations. Funding, if you can get budget, if you can get money behind any of these initiatives, that's how you make real change. And so again, that requires a lot of leadership buy-in, which I certainly believe is a place to start. And so again, where do you want to see the impact? And that, that's up to you and your organization. Is it within your workforce? Is that where you want to focus? Is it inwardly? Is it your suppliers? Are you diversifying your suppliers? Is it the marketplace? Whatever it is, it's up to you to decide where do you want to start, because diversity, equity, and inclusion could really pertain to different areas of work. With that, I say enlist your team. In my work, I very closely work with HR and making sure that our hiring processes are equitable. I work closely with our marketing department to make sure that our imagery is diverse. I work closely with our outreach team. And so I work very closely with every department within this organization. And so I will say that enlist your team, enlist those champions within your organization to help drive this work, because it can't be one person doing it. If it is a part of your values of your organization, it's important that every member of your team really knows that it's their responsibility to push this forward as well. Communicate. Communication is incredibly important. So who's hearing your message and who needs to hear it? One of the bullet points that I'll pull out of this slide is the 20-60-20 notion. Most organizations fall into this category. That means that 20% of your organization or your staff are going to be super on board with this work. They're going to be super excited about it and gung-ho, so they're bought in. And then you have 60% of your staff, and that 60% are probably going to be on the edge. They're not really certain what this work is. They don't really know what you're trying to change. But that's who you need to focus on. How do you drive them forward and get them on board to push your work forward? And then finally, you have that 20% on the end, and they are not bought in. They might never buy in. And so it's up to them to decide then, do they align with diversity, equity, and inclusion values? If your organization does, or are they going to question whether it's the right fit for them? And so again, the real focus is to be on that 80% of staff, and how do you work with them to create an environment that's inclusive, to create a culture that's inclusive. That is important now more than ever, and making sure that we remain connected as a community and as a society. And we need to be creative, as all of you are on this call with, adapting to Zoom and all of this in a new world of, I guess, the virtual living. Next, I would say is education. Education is one of the ways that most people start with diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I think it's a phenomenal place to start. Finding what's relevant to people works out really well. And so many organizations start out with implicit bias training. All of us have bias, and so it's one of the easiest places to kind of start the conversation, especially with individuals who you might sense some pushback with. And so starting with implicit bias is great. Many organizations also look into talking about microaggressions, racism, social justice. Some of those topics get a little harder to talk about, and so it takes time. And so with that, I say again, it's a journey. It'll take time, but just acknowledge that and acknowledge where your organization is at. And I do think that we'll all get there. And with that, again, make sure that the work that you do really aligns with your business values. And so again, that's something that you really need to work on with your leadership to determine what are you ready to really challenge and talk about now. Implementation. Well, I'll go back for 1 second. This has been one thing I will say is many organizations have struggled with this. After the death of George Floyd, addressing racism is not something that many organizations are ready to do or even considered doing in the past. And so as the tide changes and society changes, you can probably see many organizations standing out and making statements on different topics. And so again, with that, I will repeat that this work is definitely a journey. Some organizations are more ready to speak out than others. And so it takes time and it's uncomfortable, but I do think people are getting more open to the idea of talking about some of these issues. The next one is implementation. And implementation is definitely making sure that you are prioritizing, and prioritizing gets really difficult. And the reason I say that this is probably the most difficult piece is you never know where to get started because you could really get your hands into different aspects of the work, whether it's wanting to diversify marketing materials or working with HR on hiring plans or diversifying your pipeline or your workforce. There's so many different areas and people never know where to get started. And so with that, I say, just get started somewhere. Just have a conversation and get started. That's the best way I say to get started because many people just sit on it for too long. I'll also say celebrate your successes. To see the fruition of this work takes time, and so celebrate your successes when they come. Acknowledge your failures; they will happen, but we all learn and grow from them. Measurement. Measurement is huge, and this is incredibly important. I did prepare a handout with some guidelines for metrics for measuring that I will actually just jump to the next slide with. Start out small. So pick a couple metrics. If it is age or gender or race and ethnicity or whatever it is, start out small. Take those and then segment them out. And so don't just look at overall diversity of your organization, because many organizations you'll see that they might look diverse, but when you dive down, you'll realize that the majority of diversity that's seen is usually in frontline staff and not so much as you rise up into leadership. And so are you able to challenge your organization to think differently, to strategize and set goals for diversity at top level leadership and not just within the frontline staff? And so there are a bunch of suggestions on how to look at your demographics, how to sort your demographics to really assess where are you at as an organization. And finally, how do you sustain the work? And sustaining the work is really making sure that it is built within the structures of your organizations, that you have that senior level leadership buy-in and executive sponsorship. That's huge for your organizations. That you have representation from all different parties within your organizations. And again, you can't do it all on your own. So determine who's going to own the work so that you're accountable. And finally, I'll wrap up because I want to just leave a little bit of time for some questions as well. But a couple tips to get started. Going back to respect, I always say treat others the way that they want to be treated, not you. And so with a lot of this work, it's about assumptions. So don't make assumptions about people that you don't know. Ask them how they feel, ask them how they want to be treated. I will say relationship building is huge. Remain relentlessly curious. If you don't know somebody, as well on this call, I ask you to reach out with them, ask them to have a virtual coffee date, get to know them a bit better. I do certainly believe that the more that we get to know each other on a personal level, the more respect we have for one another, the more trust we build with one another. And as a society, I know it's just a few of us on this call in the grand scheme of things, but we're all able to make that impact within our organizations and within society. And so the ripple effect that we were speaking about earlier is real, and it does make a difference. A couple other resources, implicit bias trainings. I don't know if any of you have taken these, but Harvard University has some phenomenal implicit bias quizzes online. They're very quick and brief, so I'm sure you can just Google Harvard University implicit bias and they'll come up. But that's a great place to get started, knowing where your bias lies so that you can move on. Start with your why. Again, the Simon Sinek video that I had suggested, feel free to watch that. And then the importance of mindfulness, which I think is, again, really, really important now. I think we're all flustered and have so much on our plate, but focusing in on the moment and acknowledging what's going on is incredibly important. You know, how many times in a day do we pause and acknowledge our breathing? Not very often, right? We take a lot of things for granted. And so be mindful for yourselves so that we all remain healthy during these times, and especially as we head into winter. And then finally, I will say, get started. A lot of people overthink the work because it's complicated, but run with it, get started. We all start at different stages, but that's the best thing to do. So with that, I will stop sharing and I'll open it up to any questions.
Can you see the chat? It looks like there's a question in there. And I can read it if not. Jody says, I'm trying to become a more diverse organization. A minority may be hired to a position who is less qualified than someone who is not a minority. How best to work through?
Sure. So I personally believe that individuals that are hired into position were hired for, I would hope we're hired for the right reasons, right? And then it's about surrounding them with the resources for them to succeed. Oftentimes organizations will hire somebody on and then it is a sink or swim mentality, right? And then when it doesn't work out, they'll say, well, it must have been all on them, right? And our organizations don't like to take that responsibility. But if we want to make these organizations inclusive, if we want individuals to succeed, we need to provide them with the resources. And so with that, I will say, think about mentor relationships. How can you pair them up with somebody within the organization? And oftentimes that is, and it should be, a mutually beneficial opportunity. And so if it is a frontline staff member who's new, who individuals think may not be qualified, pair them up with somebody in executive leadership. They'll have a lot to learn. They'll have somebody to look up to, but that executive leader is also going to learn an incredible amount from this individual. I've seen it work many times where individuals who might not seem as qualified, they have lived experience that is huge, and they have that to share with their leaders. And so again, presenting them with different backgrounds and cultures, it teaches them a lot. I will say that when I started at this organization, I know Tammy's heard this story before, but when I started at this organization, I'm an individual who, I'm Pakistani and Muslim American. I was raised in a culture in which you do not talk back to your elders. And so when I walk into rooms with individuals that are older than me or that I respect, I look down. And for me, that's a sign of respect to them. And so when I started here, I would have regular one-on-ones with my supervisor, and I would look down when I spoke to her, and she thought I was timid or shy. And it wasn't until I was giving a presentation that she stopped me and she said, wow, now I get it. You're showing me respect. And it's a cultural change and a cultural difference, because in American culture, you're expected to look eye to eye with somebody. Because if I'm looking at Tammy in the eyes, she knows that I'm understanding and comprehending her. Yet for me, if I look down, I'm like, no, Tammy, I very much respect you. And that's why I'm looking down, right? So some of those minute things and differences are huge. And so with that, I say, get to know each other a bit better. If you don't know somebody, get to know their background and culture. You'll learn so much more about them. And I truly believe that my work is all about relationship building. I take moments out of my day to walk downstairs, and I set breaks on my calendar to make sure I walk through our inpatient unit to simply stop by and see how people are doing. And so now in this ever-changing world, I think the small connections are so very important.
Oh, that's great. I think it's safe that if anybody wants to unmute to ask a question, we don't just have to use the chat. Does anybody have any questions?
I see someone else had shared, Starbucks has a goal to have 30% of their executive staff members be minorities by 2025. This is now less than 5%, which is amazing. And so again, organizations that are really looking at how do I make impactful change, they're not just looking at their overall structure and saying, wow, we're, all of our baristas are very diverse. So as an organization, we're diverse. No, right? And so they really took a look at their executive leadership team and saw, we're not seeing the diversity there. So how do we fix that? And so again, very pointed, very strategic goals that were set.
I was going to ask you, Fatma, if you would just share, even and not trying to in any way throw Grace under the bus,
No,
because we don't have it. I mean, it's not, we have all these great plans and everything, but if you could even share, because it was so impactful to me the time that you shared, I think you know what I'm going to say, but about like this is a corporation who says they buy in, that they're all in, but even for you with senior level, like just that difficulty that you had, and even getting your messages communication and kind of what had to happen in order for you to be heard a little bit, if you would share, because I think that's just real.
Sure, it is. It's real. And trusted friends on this call. I did share this with Tammy and many people at Grace, but I struggled when George Floyd passed away, and I felt very strongly that we should put out a statement. And it took a lot of time for the organization to get on board. But I also felt that, as many organizations feel, that we need to walk a fine line and not being political. However, I did feel strongly that if this is an organization that believes that we value everyone from different backgrounds and races and ethnicities and whatnot, that we should stand out and say something for our staff's sake and for our community's sake, especially when we say that we're serving all of the community. And through this, that was one example, but and through many other obstacles of things that I've tried to push and that are newer to Grace and things that we haven't done in the past and haven't really tipped our feet into, there's been a lot of pushback. And one thing that I recognized early on is that our leadership is, it's all white. Our executive leadership team is all white. Within our management team, it is myself and one other person. And so it's entirely a white leadership team, which is not entirely bad. They bring different perspectives and there's different types of diversity within that leadership team. However, I've struggled in my role. There was a point where I realized that when I said something, it wouldn't get passed, and then I would get about 20 white voices to say the same thing and it would get passed. And that was really hard. And I was able to then use that and say, this is exactly what's happening, right? And so the conversations are incredibly difficult to have, but they're incredibly important. And they happen within every organization. And so if you see somebody fighting for something, I will say that you all have a role to play. If you feel comfortable, everyone's at a different stage. And now I get a lot of people asking me, what can you do? And I say, if you can speak out, if you can share, if you can push my work forward, it helps out immensely. And so those small things, even having conversations about the work makes a huge difference because it rolls up and other leaders hear about it.
Mm-hmm. Phantom, I've got to say that I work in volunteer in a housing project assigned to people, helping them, lift them up. And until I did that and really got to know the people I worked with and their everyday struggles, whether it's going to court or discrimination, very subtle, or getting along with other people, I never fully understood. I could look back and see it all. But until you get involved with the people that may be minorities or face some sort of discrimination one way or not, whether it's being a female or their race. For me, I didn't fully understand what they go through on a daily basis. It really opened my eyes a lot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's a
I
big
have
piece why Fatma was such a great addition to this group is going, she is bringing educational pieces. So we're super grateful for that, for you educating us and teaching us. So I have a personal question, if that's,
Of course.
so I have a small business, and so small family run business. And so, and I know a lot of those that are sitting in this room are the same small family run businesses. So as much as I'm hearing like hiring processes and here's what to look like, I'm not often like that's not the dynamic there. What would your suggestion be? I know some of the links for education, but some suggestions for small businesses and small organizations within our community where there isn't somebody like you within our walls, unfortunately, and that can help educate us. Other than the tools, what are some other ways that we can become more involved and make that impact?
Yeah. With small businesses, I think you're way more clued into the community than some corporations are. Small businesses, I personally feel that people know better. I mean, your customers, our clients know you, they love you. And so developing those relationships and maintaining those relationships are so important. But because you're so involved in the community, I think the first thing that came to my mind was nonprofits. Nonprofits are equally as clued into what's needed in the community. And so the more that you can partner with them, and I rely heavily on our nonprofits as well. I work very closely with, in Madison with Centro Hispano. They know the Latinx community better than anyone else. And so if I have questions about what's going on, I go to them. I don't make assumptions about or go to them and talk to them as if I know what's going on in the community, right? And so I partner very closely with them. If it's the Hmong Institute and I want to work with the Hmong population, I go reach out to them and allow them to drive the work. And so letting those communities lead and empowering them to lead is something that I would suggest, especially for small businesses, is to partner with individuals or people that are equally as invested in the community like you are.
Love it. Thank you. That's good. I wanted to make sure we have time to network and to get into our breakout rooms, which I will do manually. Don't worry, nobody has to do anything. Everyone's like, what do we do? I could just see eyeballs go. Does anybody have any other questions before we wrap up? Obviously, you can continue to use the chat box throughout the the breakout rooms and anything like that. But does anybody have any other questions? Tammy's saying thank you. Fatma will end up in a breakout room. So for those
yes, I will.
to get her breakout room, you can ask her all kinds of questions. So, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break us up into breakout rooms. What that looks like, just so that you know, on the back end, while she was speaking, we were pre-assigning some breakout rooms, and each of them have a board member in the room. Some of these board members I'm putting on the spot right now. They don't even know this. So the board members that I list in these 6 breakout rooms, if you could help be that breakout room host. One thing that, and I of course had all of these slides brought up, but with going back and forth with the breakout room, I'm afraid I'm going to lose the breakout room if I put my share screen slides up. So there were 3 things that I wanted to be able to walk through while you are in that room. Obviously, this is our opportunity to network, since we aren't getting that normal social time with everybody. So make sure you introduce yourself, tell them your name. Tell us your business. This is that little, if those of you that have attended the meetings before, that 10-second, 15-second, this is what I do. So I would say my name's Teresa Kegley. I'm with Movement Fitness. And then I would love for you guys to share some takeaways from today. I'm sure if you're like me, there are things that I was like, oh, I've never thought of that. Or, there's communication pieces. That was the big one that I took away. Like, communication's that's what I have control over. And so I'd love for you to share that in those rooms. So our breakout room board members, if you could listen to this, breakout room number 1 host is Janet. Room number 2 is Sue. Room number 3 is Tammy Kellerman. Room number 4, Tammy English. Room number 5, Karen RC, and room number 6, Jocelyn. Again, I will separate you all into that. We're going to be in our breakout rooms for about 10-15 minutes, and then I will close the breakout rooms. It will not be an abrupt close. It'll give you a 60-second countdown so that you'll start to come back into our main room. So who would have thought we'd be having these? I'm going to put you in your room A to hang out with. It's just weird. But so you all start to like disappear into the rooms now. So we'll see you in just a little bit. Thank you so much. If you're seeing it, you can just accept the invitation to that breakout room. Most of you are doing it. You're catching on. Good job. Perfect, perfect. If any of you are not seeing a link to the breakout room, make sure you let me know in the comments and I will make sure I can put you into one. If not, you should see an invitation on your link that's saying you're in breakout room, whatever, accept. Hello, hello. Everybody's coming back. All right, we're getting everybody back. Everybody's coming back fast and furious. You see it all like loading in.
That was so nice. I'm glad we did the rooms, Teresa.
Did everybody like the rooms? Yes, yes.
Yes.
It was wonderful.
Thumbs
We
up.
loved it.
I
Yeah,
popped into a
we're
couple
gonna
groups.
get a new gig. We're gonna be talk show hosts,
Oh,
according to Tia.
yes. I said maybe one of these days, like I'm gonna have a special guest with me. Originally, we
Oh,
had
there
talked
you
about,
go.
like, the board of us doing this together. My concern was after I realized I had to do the room thing, I was like, I might get too distracted and mess up if I have a friend here with me. Be like, hey, oh wait, we're here. Well, my hope was that the rooms too allowed some connectivity, and I did pop into most of the rooms, and there was connection. There wasn't a quiet room. I will tell you that there was not a quiet room, so that's great. And I always feel like the right people end up on the right ones, right? So that's kind of how it ends up. So, well, I want to thank you all for being here and for joining us again. A couple things just to kind of recap. I want to first thank our wonderful speaker. Not only did she share great things, but she, in my opinion, really educated. And what a blessing that is when we're trying to navigate some tricky stuff, right? And so thank you very much for giving us insight and charging us with some things to look into. So we appreciate that. So thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day to join and to check in and to meet others and all of that. We really appreciate it. Next month, our date for next month is November the 16th at 11:30 a.m. So I know there was a little bit of mix up about our start time, and I apologize for that. We're trying to figure out, like, do we do it on the start time of when we would start our meetings? Do we do the networking? And each week we'll do the networking on the back end. A little different than our face-to-face meetings, but we didn't want people to join in straight into rooms because then that's a little awkward. So, so yeah. And I'm getting a question: will I be sending? Yes, I will send the handout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load this into YouTube, and then in the YouTube notes, as well as on our Facebook page, I will save on a Google Drive the notes that she referenced so that it's all within one meeting. So you'll notice that. I also encourage you to go check out the YouTube page. There is a video link from our kickoff that has our wonderful skit on it. You need to check it out. It's really cute, but we'll also send that out in an email, follow-up email. So any other questions before we jump off? No. Perfect. Well, again, thank you. Thanks for extending some grace as we figure this out. And thanks for participating, and commenting and reacting and letting us know. And always please email me too if there's ever any feedback or questions. Okay. All right. Until next month, ladies. We'll see ya. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
All right, how do I turn this off? Okay.
Did you figure it out?
No, how do I get out of here? I don't know. I think I just closed it. Okay.